She smells like the first warm rain of the year. And I love her, go and tell her right now, you enormous coward. That was the voice in my skull, and it did not stop, and there was nothing in the world I could do about it, because the voice belonged to my wolf, and my wolf had never once in his long life learned to whisper. I stood in the arched doorway of my own mead hall with my hands clasped behind my back and my face set like a stone lintel. And inside me Bracken paced and moaned and pressed his nose to the seam of my ribs as if he could shove me across the room by force of longing alone. Around us the whole hall roared with the first thaw, kettles hissed. 100 wolves of my pack shouted over one another about Barley and Blossom, and whose turn it was to fetch the melt water. And in the middle of all of it, up to her elbows in a vat of spiced mead with her sleeves shoved back and a smear of flour along her jaw, stood the brewmistress of Highmead, laughing at something the old cellarer had said, and my wolf lost his entire mind. Look at her, he said. She just rolled up her sleeves. That is the finest thing I have witnessed in 40 years. Roll up your sleeves, too. Do something with your arms. Why are your arms just hanging there like dead branches? I did not move my arms. I had learned long ago that the only defense against Bracken was to give the world a face that betrayed nothing, and I had spent 31 years perfecting it. My council called me the Stone of the Thawmore. My enemies called me colder things. Not one of them knew that behind the stone lived a creature with the dignity of a puppy who has found a boot, and that the creature spent most of his waking hours narrating my private feelings at a volume that would carry across a battlefield. If they had known, no one in the Four Vales would have feared me at all. My king, that was Councillor Hale, at my shoulder, smelling of ink and ambition. The Asheville delegation crosses the river tomorrow at midday. Alpha Korach will expect your answer at the right. His daughter is said to be gracious, well-mannered, of excellent blood. Boring, said Bracken. Boring, boring. Does she smell like warm rain? She does not. Nobody smells like warm rain except the one stirring the mead, and if you make me stand next to some gracious, well-mannered stranger at the right, I will lie down in the snow and refuse to get up. I have heard you the first 4 times, Hale, I said aloud, and my voice came out flat and even, and the counselor took it for cold consideration. It was not. It was the sound of a man trying to hold a door shut against a flood. The alliance is sound. Asheville's timber and our grain would feed both packs through any winter. I know my duty. Your duty, Bracken said, in the tone of a wolf spitting out a bad berry. Go and stir the mead. That is your duty. She has been carrying that ladle since dawn. Her wrist must ache. Go and take it from her. Go and be useful. Go, G.O. And here is the thing that undid my whole careful life, though I did not understand it yet on that first bright morning. Across the crowded, clattering hall, the brewmistress lifted her head. She looked straight through the steam and the shoulders and the noise, straight to me in the doorway, and I will swear this to my dying day, she smiled as if she had heard a good joke, and she called out over everyone, "It's not aching, your grace, but thank you for the concern." I had not said one word about her wrist, not aloud, not to anyone. Hale blinked. My king, did you? No, I said. I had gone very still. Beside my heart, Bracken had gone still too, which he never did, and for one long breath the two of us stared across the hall at the woman with flour on her jaw, and she raised one eyebrow at us both and went back to her mead. Her name was Rena, and everyone in Highmead knew her, which tells you at once that she was nothing like me. I moved through my own pack like a boulder through a stream, respected, gone around, rarely spoken to unless spoken to first. Rena was the stream. She was the keeper of the mead hall kitchens, which in the Thawmore is less a post than a throne because everything in our pack that matters happens over food. Births were wedded in her cider. Feuds were settled at her long table. Every pup in the Vale had at some point been caught with a stolen honey cake and forgiven at her hearth. When she walked the market, the whole row of stalls leaned toward her like plants toward a window. She had a loud, unbothered laugh and a habit of finishing other people's sentences correctly, and she had never once, in all the years she had cooked in my hall, seemed the least bit frightened of me. Her kitchen was the loudest room in my kingdom, and I mean that as the highest praise I know how to give. It was never empty and never quiet. She kept a crew of 12 girls and boys and 2 grandmothers, and a one-eyed baker named Posh who had lost the eye to a kicking mule, and told the story differently every time. And they shouted and sang and argued over the correct amount of clove in a thaw cake, as if the fate of the Vale hung on it. And Rena presided over the whole roaring business like a captain in a good wind, calling out corrections, settling the clove argument with a taste and a verdict. laughing that big unbothered laugh that carried out into the corridors and made even my dour house guards smile behind their hands. Pups were always underfoot in that kitchen, stealing, and always being fed anyway. Old men who had nowhere warm to be found a stool by her hearth and a cup of something and someone to listen to them. I had passed that doorway 10,000 times in my life and never once gone in without an excuse, because a stone does not know how to walk into a fire and simply sit down. And I had envied every mule-kicked baker and hearth-stealing pup who did it without a second thought. I had noticed her the way you notice weather. And then 3 weeks before the first thaw, on an ordinary gray afternoon, I had come into the kitchens to sign the festival store's ledger, and she had been standing at the window with the light on her, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. And Bracken had risen up inside me with a sound I had never heard him make before, not the war growl, not the hunt song, but a low, astonished warmth, like a fire remembering it knew how to burn, and he had said, quite clearly, "Oh, there she is." And something behind my sternum had loosened all at once, as if a river long frozen had shifted under the ice, and I had signed the ledger in the wrong place and left without a word, and stood in the corridor for a full minute with my hand flat against the cold stone, trying to breathe. That was the bond. I knew what it was. Every alpha knows the old telling that somewhere the moon has tied a thread to your marrow, and one day you cross the room and the thread pulls taut, and after that there is no untying it. I had waited 31 years for that pull and had half decided it would never come for me. And when at last it came for the brewmistress of my own hall, on a Tuesday, over a store's ledger, and I had promptly done nothing about it for 3 weeks except sign things incorrectly and avoid the kitchens, and let my counsel march me toward a wedding with a stranger from Asheville. Because, and I am not proud of this, I did not know how to say it. I could hold a boarder with 40 men. I could stare down an alpha twice my weight until he looked at his boots. But the thought of walking up to Rena and letting one true thing out of my mouth turned my tongue to River Stone. What if the pull was only mine? What if she felt nothing but the ordinary wariness that everyone felt, and I made her afraid of her own kitchen, the one place in the Vale that had always been hers? A king who cannot be refused has no business asking a question he cannot bear the answer to. So I said nothing. And Bracken, who had no such fears and no such dignity, said everything. He said it the very next dawn, when I could not help myself, and came down to the kitchens under the excuse of inspecting the thaw stores. The hall was half dark and smelled of yeast and wood smoke, and yes, warm rain. Rena was alone at the long table, wrapping little wheels of cheese in cloth, humming. "Tell her the cheese wrapping is the loveliest work in the kingdom," Bracken said instantly. "Tell her humming is better than the festival horns. Tell her you didn't sleep because you kept thinking about the way she said your name yesterday. Your Grace." A little dry, a little amused, as if she can see straight through your stone and finds the man behind it not half so frightening as he pretends. "Good morning, Your Grace," Rena said, not looking up. "You didn't sleep." I stopped dead in the doorway for the second morning in a row. The stores I managed. I came to inspect the stores. She tied off a wheel of cheese with a neat little bow. "You inspected them Tuesday and Thursday. They haven't run off." A pause, and then, still to the cheese, with the very faintest curve at the corner of her mouth. "You must be dreadfully worried about our cheese." Behind my ribs, Bracken had flopped down flat and put both paws over his eyes. "She knows," he groaned. "She knows we keep coming down here. Say something charming. Say anything. Do not say." "The cheese is a matter of state," I said. That Bracken finished in despair. But Rena laughed. Not a polite laugh, not the careful little sound people made around me, but a real one, sudden and warm, that filled the dark kitchen up to the rafters. "A matter of state," she repeated, delighted. "The cheese. Oh, that's very good, Your Grace. You should tell your council. They'd take it seriously." "They take everything you say seriously." She wiped her hands on her apron and finally looked at me, and her eyes were bright and unafraid and full of something I could not name. "It must be terribly lonely," she said more gently, "being taken so seriously all the time." No one had ever said such a thing to me in my life. I did not know what to do with it. Bracken, of course, did. "Marry her," he said. "Marry her today. Cancel Asheville. I have decided. This is the one. I have never been more certain of anything, and I am a wolf of very strong opinions." I inclined my head, said something about the barley count, and fled. I fled from my own kitchen, in my own hall, from a woman half my size holding a wheel of cheese. And as I climbed the stair with my heart going like a drum, I heard her call after me, warm and unmistakably teasing. "Sleep, your grace, the cheese will keep." I had not told her I hadn't slept. Bracken had. Bracken had only ever thought it, and she had answered. I could not stay away after that. I know how that sounds from a man who had just fled a wheel of cheese, but the fleeing and the returning were the same sickness wearing two coats. That afternoon there was garland to hang for the festival, long ropes of dried blossom and evergreen that had to be strung from the gallery rail the length of the hall. And it was not a king's work. And I did it anyway, because Rena was doing it, up a ladder with her sleeves shoved back and her mouth full of pins, and Bracken would sooner have died than let me be anywhere else. "She's going to fall off that ladder," he fretted the moment I came in. "She's on the top rung. Go and hold the ladder. Hold it. That's a useful thing to do with your dead branch arms. Go and hold the ladder and look up at her adoringly. No, not that adoringly, you'll frighten the woman. Look up at her a normal amount." I held the ladder. Rena glanced down at me around a mouthful of pins, and her eyes crinkled, and she took the pins out and said, "You know, your grace, we have people for this. Whole strong young people whose entire task today is the garland. You are, I'm fairly sure, meant to be signing a treaty." "The treaty can wait," I said. It was the truest thing I had said aloud in a week, and I did not even notice I had said it. Above me, she went very still on the ladder for half a heartbeat. Then she pinned a length of blossom to the rail and said lightly, too lightly, "Can it now?" And I understood, too late. As always, that Bracken had been narrating my heart the whole time I stood there holding her ladder and looking up a normal amount, that she had heard him say she strings a garland the way other women wear jewels, and that a hall she had dressed was the only hall I ever wanted to stand in, and that when I had said the treaty can wait she had heard, underneath it. The wolf finished the sentence, "The treaty can wait, everything can wait. I would hold this ladder until the thaw came round again if it kept me in a room with her." She pinned blossom for a while in silence, high above me, and her cheeks were pink, and it was not from the work. "Your grace," she said at last, not looking down, "may I ask you something and you needn't answer?" "Yes," I said, "hold the ladder. Say yes to everything, marry her." "Do you ever say any of it?" she asked, quiet, careful, the tease gone soft. "The kind things, the ones a person can tell you must think from the way you go quiet and your ears change color. Do you ever just say them?" "To anyone." And I, the fool, the coward, the stone, looked up at the woman who had already heard every kind thing I had ever thought, and was giving me the plainest opening a man was ever handed to say one of them out loud, and I said, "The garland looks well." And Bracken put both paws over his eyes and made a sound like a kettle going off, and Rena laughed, but there was something wistful in it now, and she said, "It does, doesn't it?" and came down the ladder, and the moment closed like a door, and I had shut it myself again with my own two hands. I told myself it was coincidence. A king does not sleep well. Anyone might guess it from the shadows under his eyes. I told myself this for exactly one day, which was how long it took the Asheville delegation to arrive, and for everything to get very much stranger. They came across the Meltwater River at midday, banners high, 40 riders and a covered wagon and Alpha Korach at the front of them, broad and gray and pleased with himself, and at his side on a pale horse, his daughter Sable. She was, as promised, gracious. She was also, I saw this at once, and was ashamed of how much it relieved me, bored to the roots of her being by the whole affair. A young woman being marched toward a marriage of grain and timber by a father who had never once asked what she wanted. She greeted me with perfect courtesy and eyes that slid past me to the hall, the pack, the festival, anything but the man she was meant to wed two prisoners, I thought, being introduced at the door of the same cell. I felt for her. I would think of that feeling again later, and it would matter. The whole pack turned out for the welcome, of course, and the whole pack meant Rena, who had produced from her kitchens in the space of a morning a spread that made even Korach's counselors go quiet with respect, thaw cakes and honeyed nuts, and the first pale gold mead of the season. And she moved among the Asheville guests, filling cups and trading jokes and making every stiff, travel-worn stranger feel, within minutes, that they had come home. I stood at the high table being an alliance, and I watched her, and Bracken narrated. She gave the grumpy one the extra cake he observed of a scarred Asheville outrider. Did you see that? She saw he was sad about something, and she gave him the extra cake without making a thing of it. That is the kind of person she is. When we are wed, I am going to sit under that table every single day of my life. Torin, are you attending? She is coming this way with the mead. Sit up. Smell nice. Do we smell nice? Why did you wear the gray? The gray is a coward's color. Renna arrived at the high table with the mead jug and filled Alpha Korach's cup, and Sable's, and then came to me. And as she leaned to pour, she said, under the noise of the hall, so low that only I could have heard it, and I realized much later, so low that not even her own packmates at the near benches caught it. Grace suits you, your grace. Don't let anyone tell you it's a coward's color. The jug did not shake in her hand, but mine did on the arm of my chair. There are moments when a man's whole understanding of the world turns over like a boat. That was mine, because I had not spoken the word coward aloud in 3 days. No living soul had said it. It had existed in exactly one place in all the Thaummore, inside my own skull, in the voice of my wolf. And now it had come back to me out of the mouth of the brewmistress, dry and kind and teasing, as if she were answering a conversation I had been too much of a coward to have out loud. I set down the mead untouched. Across the hall the festival roared on, and inside me, for the first time in his life, Bracken had gone completely, utterly silent, and then he said, very quietly, in a voice full of dawning wonder, "Torin, she heard me." I did not sleep that night either, and this time it was not longing but bewilderment. I sat by my cold hearth and turned it over and over. A wolf's inner voice is the most private thing a man owns. It is not speech. It does not leave the body. Even a bonded mate in the old tellings feels the bond as a pull and a warmth and a knowing, not as words overheard. What I was describing was impossible, and yet the evidence had piled up over 4 days like snow against a door, the wrist, the sleep, the coward's color gray. Every one of them a thing Bracken had thought and I had not said, every one of them handed back to me by a laughing woman with flour on her jaw. So before dawn, I went to find the one creature in my hall older than the Alliance and wiser than the Council, Maddox the cellarer, who had wrapped cheese and racked mead in the mead hall since before my father was Alpha, and who knew every old telling in the Vale because he had outlived everyone who might have contradicted him. I found him in the cellar by candlelight, and I did not waste his time. "Maddox," I said, "is there a telling, an old one, of a person who can hear a wolf that is not their own, not the bond, not the pull, the actual voice?" The old man went still with his hand on a mead cask. Then he set down his candle, and he looked at me for a long moment with eyes gone milky at the edges but sharp as ever in the middle, and he said, "Wolf heard." "What?" "That's the old word for it, wolf heard." He lowered himself onto a stool with a grunt. "My grandmother told it once, and her grandmother told her, so you may take it for as true as anything that far back. She said the moon ties her threads before we're born, you know that part. Every pup knows that part, the thread in the marrow, the mate at the far end of it." He tapped his own chest. "But she said that once in a great long while, once in 5 generations if that, the moon ties the thread so early and so tight, before either soul draws breath, before either has a face, that when at last the two come near, the one can hear the other's wolf. Not feel it, hear it. Every fool thought, every fond word, plain as a bell." His mouth creased. "The old word for a mate like that is wolf heard. And the telling says there's no mistaking such a bond and no undoing it, because the moon doesn't waste that kind of knot on a maybe. The last one anyone in this vale remembered was the miller's wife, 6 alphas back, who used to answer her husband's wolf before he'd opened his mouth, and drove him half to madness and wholly to devotion for 50 years. He picked his candle back up, and then he set it down again because he was not finished, and the old ones are never finished. "There's a warning in the telling too, mind." My grandmother was firm on it. She said the wolf herd hears the good half of you, the honest half, the half that can't help but love plain as day from the very first. But the wolf herd cannot hear the stubborn half, the frightened half, the half that keeps its mouth shut. That half she has to wait for, same as any woman waits for any man to find his nerve. And my grandmother said the danger of it, the only danger is that a fool might think, well, she's heard my wolf say all the tender things, so she knows, so I needn't ever say them myself. And that fool loses her. Maddox fixed me with his one clear middle-of-the-eye look. "Because the whole of the telling, my king, the whole reason the moon ties that rare tight not at all, is this. It puts a mate close enough to hear the best of you every day of her life, so that you will finally, one blessed day, be brave enough to catch up to your own wolf and say it in your own voice. The gift isn't the hearing. The gift is the daring. Woe to the man who takes the one and never learns the other." He blew a breath through his teeth. "Why do you ask me a thing like that at this hour, 4 days before you wed a stranger from Asheville?" I did not answer him. I climbed up out of the cellar into the gray light, and I stood in the empty hall where the Thor banners hung, and behind my ribs Bracken said, softly, so softly, the softest I had ever heard him. She's ours, she was ours before we had faces, and you were going to marry the timber and the grain. Here is what a coward does with a revelation like that. He does not run to the kitchen and fall on his knees. He tests it. He tells himself he must be certain, which is only fear wearing the mask of prudence. All that day, through the festival prep, through Korech's tedious talk of borders, I watched Rena from across rooms and I let Bracken think things at her, small, safe things, tests. And I watched to see if they came back. Tell her the blue ribbon in her hair is my favorite thing she owns, Bracken thought, when she passed under the gallery with the market baskets. And an hour later, hanging garland in the hall, Rena caught me looking and touched the blue ribbon at her temple and said, "You like this one, do you? I'll wear it Thursday then." And my ears went hot and I turned the wrong way into a doorframe. I should have stopped there. A sensible man would have stopped there. But I had spent 31 years being sensible, and it had got me a cold hall and a wedding to the timber. So instead I did something reckless. That evening at the feast, with the whole hall between us and Korech droning in my ear, I looked at Rena carrying a tray of thaw cakes, and I let Bracken have his head entirely, just once to be sure. Let him think the biggest, most foolish, most undefended thing in me. The thing I had never let past my own teeth. I would give up the crown before I gave up her. I would rather muck out the mead cellar at her side for the rest of my life than sit on any throne in the Four Vales without her in the room. Across the hall, Rena stopped walking. She stood stock still in the middle of my crowded feast with a tray of cakes going cold in her hands, and she looked at me, and every scrap of the teasing was gone from her face, and her eyes were huge and bright and swimming, and her mouth opened and shut once with no sound. A pup tugged her apron for a cake, and she gave it one without looking down. She was looking at me, only at me. And I knew, past any last cowardly doubt, that she had heard the thing about the mead cellar and the crown, the truest and most reckless thing in the whole of my hidden heart, and that it had gone into her like a key into a lock. She hears every word, Bracken crowed. She hears every word, Bracken crowed, delighted beyond all bearing. Torren, Torren, she hears me. Do you understand what this means? It means all those charming things you never had the spine to say. She's had them the whole time. She knows we saved her the last honey cake. She knows we reread the store's ledger Tuesday just to stand in her kitchen. She knows we think her laugh sounds like the river breaking up in spring, which is the highest compliment a wolf can pay, and you have never once said it with your mouth. She knows everything. You have been courting her for weeks, you dolt. You just didn't know you'd been doing it out loud. And that the moment I understood that was when the bewilderment finally cracked and the shame came flooding through because Bracken was right. For weeks this woman had been hearing my whole hidden heart, not the stone, the man behind it, the one who lay awake. The one who thought her the finest thing in Four Vales and could not say so. She had heard all of it, every soft, undefended word, and she had not laughed at me. Well, she had laughed, but warmly, the way you laugh at someone you are fond of, and she had not been frightened. And she had gone on filling my hall with cheese, and light as if a lonely, tongue-tied king were nothing to be afraid of at all. She had known for days, and she had been waiting. Waiting, I understood with a lurch, for me to say one single true thing in my own voice, instead of hiding behind the wolf who had no choice but to be honest. The trouble was that my duty did not wait for my heart to find its courage. That same midday my council sat in the long stone chamber above the hall, and I sat at the head of them, and there was no room in that grave and paneled place for a man who had just learned the moon had tied him to his kitchen cook. There was only room for the alliance. They were not bad men, my council. That is what makes a thing like this so hard. It would be simpler if they were villains. There was Hale, young and sharp and hungry for the pack to prosper because he had grown up in the lean years and could not bear to see them come again. There was old Brindes, the eldest she-wolf of Highmead, gray to her bones, who had buried 2 hard winters' worth of pups she could not feed and who wanted the grain road open more than she wanted her next breath. There was Alden, my master of boarders, who spoke rarely and only about defense, and who reminded us all, in his flat way, that Asheville's timber walls between us and the wild north were worth more than gold. One after another they laid it out, and every word of it was true, and every word of it was a stone laid across the door I most wanted to open. The northern packs grow bolder every thaw, Alden said. Asheville holds the passes. Bound to them by marriage, we hold the passes too. Bound to them by nothing, we hold a promise, and promises melt like the rest of the snow. 2 lean years in 5 this last decade, said Brindes, and she did not raise her voice, which was worse than if she had. I have carried small coffins up the moor path, my king, more of them than I will name at this table. Asheville grain in our stores means I carry fewer. You will forgive an old woman for caring about that above the finer feelings of kings. Tell her, Bracken said, low and miserable, that we care about the small coffins, too. Tell her we would never, Torin. Tell her we're not choosing feelings over pups. Tell her there might be another way, tell her. But there was no telling them any of it, because what would I have said? That the moon herself had a plan that did not appear in any treaty, that my cook could hear my wolf. Brindes had buried children. She was not going to lay their memory down for a telling 6 alphas old about a miller's wife. So I sat at the head of my grave council and I said, in the flat, even voice that had held the door shut my whole life, "The Alliance serves the pack. I hear you, all of you." And Hale glowed, and Brindes nodded once, satisfied, and Alden said nothing, which from Alden was applause, and inside me my wolf lay down in the dark and would not look at any of them. That is the thing no one tells you about a crown. It is not the enemies that undo you. It is the people you love and are sworn to, asking you, with good reason and honest grief, to do the very thing that will cost you your whole heart, and being right to ask it. I left that chamber more trapped than I had entered it, because now the walls of the trap had the faces of my own good people on them, and I could not hate a single one. I did not get to say it that day, because that evening the trap of my own duty closed the rest of the way. Alpha Korach cornered me after the meal, expansive with mead, and clapped my shoulder and said that Sable had taken to the Vale, that the packs were of one mind, that all that remained was the word before the pack. And where better than the first thaw right itself, 2 nights hence, before the whole of Highmead and Asheville, the alliance sealed and the marriage announced in one stroke, the timber and the grain and his daughter's hand, all bound together under the thaw moon. 2 nights, Hale murmured at my other side, glowing. It's perfect, my king, it's everything we've worked for. Say no, Bracken said, low and urgent, all the play gone out of him. Torin, say no, say it now. But Korach was watching me with his shrewd gray eyes, and behind him stood the Asheville delegation who had come across a cold river in good faith, and behind them stood my own people, who needed the grain road open and the timber flowing, and had trusted their king to be, above all things, a man who kept his word. A refusal now in the hall, with no reason a proud old alpha could accept, for what would I say that my kitchen cook could hear my wolf? Would not free me. It would only shame Sable, insult Korach, and set 2 packs at each other's throats on the eve of the thaw. I had spent my whole life being the man who did the hard, correct thing so that other people did not have to. I did not know in that moment how to stop. So I said, "The right, then," and I felt the words go out of me like a door swinging shut, and I did not look toward the kitchen because I could not bear to. But she had heard. Of course she had heard not the deal that was struck too far across the hall, but Bracken, who at the sound of my own voice sealing it had let out a howl inside me that had no words in it at all, only grief, the raw grief of a creature watching the one thread the moon ever tied for him being handed away for timber. I felt Renna's eyes find me from the kitchen doorway. I made myself meet them for 1 second. Her face was not teasing now. It was still and pale, and there was a question in it, and behind the question something that looked terribly like hope trying not to break. Then Hale steered me toward Korach for the toast, and when I looked back she was gone, and Bracken was keening, and I understood that I had 2 nights to find out whether I was a king or only a coward in a crown. That first night I could not sleep, and near the middle of it I went down through the dark hall. I told myself for air, but a wolf knows his own lies, and I came to the top of the kitchen stair, and I stopped, because the kitchen below was still lit and still full. Renna kept late hours the week of the thaw, the cakes had to prove overnight, the meat had to be watched. But it was not only work keeping them up. It was a council of their own, held over a flowered table, and it was about me. And I'll say it plain even if none of the rest of you will, came the voice of Posh the one-eyed baker, hot and low. It's a shame is what it is. Any wolf in this hall with a nose could tell you which way the king turns when he comes down that stair, and it isn't toward the Asheville girl, may she keep well, it's no fault of hers. And now he's to stand up in the meadow and pledge to the timber like our Renna's nothing but the woman who pours it. Posh, that was Renna, and her voice was steady, though I stood in the dark above her and heard the effort it cost. Leave it. I won't leave it, said one of the grandmothers, and there was a general low rumble of the crew agreeing. A whole warm, indignant pack of them ranged around her hearth in the dark. You've heard the man's own heart, girl. You've told us his wolf's been singing your praises up and down this kitchen for a week. That's not nothing, that's the moon talking. It's the moon talking to a man too frightened to open his mouth, Renna said, and now the steadiness cracked, just once the way Thoice cracks, a single sharp sound, and then the whole quiet running underneath. And I will not have the lot of you making war on an alliance this pack needs because a king can't find his voice. Brindy's buried pups these last winters, Posh. Real ones. That grain road matters more than any of this. A pause. Then softer, so soft I had to hold my breath to catch it. So soft I do not think she meant a single soul to hear. He knows how I'd answer. He's known for days. His wolf hears me the way I hear his wolf. I'd stake my life on it. If he wanted to unstrike the bargain, he'd have come down these stairs and said so. He hasn't. So it's answered, isn't it? Now prove the cakes and go to bed, all of you, and not another word against the Asheville girl who's done nothing but be born to the wrong father. And I stood at the top of my own kitchen stair in the dark, the stone of the Thawmore, and I heard the woman the moon had tied to me tell a room full of people who loved her to stand down and let her heart be traded for grain because she thought I had chosen not to come, because I had let her think it, because I had not come down the stairs. Go down now, Bracken said, and he was not playful, he was pleading. He had never in his life pleaded. 12 steps, Torin. She's right there. Go down the 12 steps and say it, please. I gripped the cold rail. I got as far as the first step. And then Brindy's face rose up in me, and the small coffins on the moor path, and Korech's honest handshake, and the whole grave weight of a king's duty, and I turned, coward that I was for one more night, and I climbed back up into the dark. And behind me the kitchen light burned on, and my wolf wept without tears the whole long way to my cold and empty bed. I did not go to her the next morning. I want to be honest about that, because a wolf's mate deserves the truth, and so does anyone who hears this told. I did not go because I told myself there was nothing to say that would not make it worse, that a bound king had no right to stand in her kitchen and offer her a longing he had already promised to somebody else. Nobility, I called it. It was cowardice with better manners. And Bracken, who had narrated my every feeling for 31 years, would not narrate a single one that day. He lay in me silent and heavy as a stone in a well, and his silence was worse than any howl. It was Sable who nearly saved me a day early, though neither of us knew it at the time. I came upon her that afternoon at the edge of the meadow where the thaw fires were being laid, standing apart from her father's people with her cloak drawn close, watching the meltwater run and looking as though she would very much like to be running with it. I would have passed by. I was poor company that day and knew it, but she turned and saw me, and there was no point in either of us pretending, so I stopped. They're saying the words tomorrow, she said without greeting, looking back at the water. The 2 packs made 1 words. My father has already written the letter to send home. He wrote it before we crossed the river. She said it without heat, only a great tiredness, the tiredness of a person who has been decided about for a long time. Do you know, Your Grace, I have met you 3 times now, and you have been perfectly courteous each time, and I do not think either of us has once said a single true thing to the other. It's an odd way to begin a marriage. Truthfully, it's an odd way to begin anything. Tell her the truth, Bracken said, stirring for the first time all day. She's owed it, tell her. But I was a coward that afternoon, too, and the alliance sat on my chest like a cairn stone, and so I said only, you did not choose this. No, she agreed. And neither did you. I think you have the look of a man being marched somewhere. I've worn it in enough mirrors to know it. She was quiet a moment, watching the ice break up and go by. There's a horse breeder 2 vales east of my home, she said, so quietly I nearly missed it under the water's noise, who lies awake, I'm told, about me. My father says a horse breeder is beneath a king's alliance. She gave a small, dry laugh and turned her clear eyes on me. I don't want your hall, Your Grace. I want to say that once out loud to someone before tomorrow, because after tomorrow I won't get to. I don't want your hall, and I don't think you want me in it, and we are both going to stand in that meadow and pretend otherwise because our fathers and our councils and our grain roads require it. That's all. That's the true thing. I feel better for having said it. I should have said mine then. I should have said, there is a woman in my kitchen, the moon tied to my marrow, before I had a face, and we are 2 prisoners standing at the door of the same cell, and I know where the key is. I did not. I was not yet brave enough, even-handed a moment as open as that one. But I looked at her honesty, at the horse breeder 2 vales east who lay awake, and something in me that had been all cairnstone and duty shifted a hair, the first small give of the thaw, and I thought, she deserves better than to be a clause in a treaty. And so I understood dimly, does the woman in my kitchen. And so, moon help me, do I did not act on the thought that afternoon. But it was laid down in me like a coal under ash, and it was still warm the next night when at last I needed it. You are owed better than this, my lady, was all I managed. I am sorry for my part in it.